Thank you very much, Shruti. Ladies and gentlemen, it is such a privilege and an honor to have the iconic N.R. Narayana Murthy here with us at the CNBC TV 18 Global Leadership Summit. And for me personally, he has been a mentor. I did my first interview with him about 20 years ago, and we've had an interview pretty much every year since then. I've been part of all the milestones that Infosys clocked, and so we're very, very happy, Mr. Murthy, that you could join us here on a very important milestone that we're clocking here today. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Well, Shireen, I've always treated you like I treat my daughter Akshata. So you are special, and therefore attending this event and having conversation with you is, of course, an absolute privilege and a pleasure and pride. Thank you.
The privilege and pleasure is all mine, sir. So let me start by talking to you about the next 25 for India. As you look at where we stand today, Mr. Murthy, and there is a lot of hope, there's a lot of optimism, what is your prescription for the road ahead, the next 25 for India, the Narayan Murthy notes?
Thank you. Well, you know, we have done reasonably well in the last 30 years. And in the last 10 years, we have acquired a new confidence, a new hope, a new sense of energy. For example, in my own middle-class locality where I live in Bangalore, Jayanagar, I see new restaurants coming up, small restaurants, new barber shops, new fitness salons, street vendors selling apple, oranges, peas, capsicum, etc., etc. These are not things that we used to see earlier. In other words, there is a reasonable disposable income in the hands of the urban middle class. At the same time, India has huge challenges. First of all, before I say that, let me say this. I am running 79 years. No, it's very important to say I am elder to most politicians and definitely much elder to all bureaucrats. So whatever I say is with a sense of affection and admiration. And it's not criticism. I don't know how long I will live. My friend Ratan went away a few weeks ago. Therefore, I have no vested interest in whatever I say. All that I want is to see an India which has fulfilled the dreams of our founding fathers. Anyway, having said that, I say that at the same time, you see 800 million Indians receiving free rations. You see free electricity being given. You see free bus rides being given. While you look at it from one perspective, these are all good things, but another perspective says that while urban India is making rapid strides, there is a large part of India that has not benefited from all the wonderful globalization that we have had. So therefore, the need of the day for us is to focus on job creation. Primarily low-tech job creation, because most of these people who are on ration or people, they cannot take up jobs in the software industry or whatever it is. So the focus has to be on low-tech job creation. And number two, given that the disposable income of India is rather low, therefore, we have to focus on exports. Like China did, and like Vietnam is doing now, and like a few other nations in East Asia are doing. because that's the only way you can create large number of jobs, and that's the only way you can put some disposable income in the hands of people. And that's the only way that secondary and tertiary industries, like what Harsha was saying, that all this Swiggy and all of that, they can indeed take off. And that obviously is export oriented. What that means is we have to become nimble. We have to learn from our competitive countries. We have to take quick decisions. We have to get to a level of excellence in everything that we do, definitely a higher level of excellence. How do we do it? You know, a lot of my European and American friends tell me that it is time for India to move from an administrative mindset to a management mindset. They tell me that administration is all about status quo. On the other hand, management is all about vision, high aspiration. It's about achieving the plausibly impossible. It is about cost control. It is about raising the confidence of people. It is about making things happen quickly and being very competitive. It's about learning from our competitors, etc. So maybe Prime Minister Modi, who has done a brilliant job so far in terms of accelerating our economy, all of that, may want to look at whether we need more of managers in the government rather than administrators. And to do that, they perhaps may want to look at, rather than the current method of having some, whatever it is, some 3-4 subjects, examination, etc. for the IAS, he may want to look at selecting people from the various management institutes, bringing them into the government. I hope the opposition won't have much objection, like they have already raised. Bring them into the government. First, get them trained at Mussoorie on decision-making under uncertainty, on facing the competition, on creating competitive advantages, on being open-minded to learn from people who have performed better than us, on strategic thinking, on simulation, on workflow management, on project management, and other management techniques. The second thing that we may want to do, because we have, I often used to tell at Infosys, the reward for winning the semi-final is to get to play a tougher game, which is the final. Therefore, the fact that India has tasted success, the fact that India under Prime Minister Modi has done a good job so far, what that really means is this: we, the Indian citizens, must be in a position to play an even tougher game, a more difficult game, a game that will gladden the heart of every Indian. And to do that, one of the things that we may want to look at is, instead of becoming general administrators, we may want these management trainees that are trained at Mussoorie to be allotted to specific functions in the public governance system: agriculture, defense, and manufacturing, infrastructure, whatever it is. And then they have to spend the required number of years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, etc., like it happens in some of the developed nations, so that they do become subject matter experts and they can find solutions to us. And the third thing that I would like to suggest is, India has a lot of intellectuals who have had tremendous accomplishments in the private sector. And if every ministry has a committee of these experts who have accomplished, and the chairman of that committee has the same cabinet position as the minister in charge, and if any major decision to be taken is to be approved by both the minister and the usual bureaucracy as well as this committee, I do think that we will accelerate our growth very well. I hope India becomes a nation that is more management oriented than just administration oriented. You know, if I may be permitted to say this, one of my British friends was telling me, he was a cabinet secretary long time ago. And I once told him, he's a very good friend, I told him, what man, you fellows, you have destroyed our country, bureaucracy, all of that. He said, no, Murthy, that is not true. Because we have evolved with times. He says, go to any service in the UK and you will get the promised service on time without you having to remind them even more. That is absolutely true because both my children are residents of the UK and they get all their tax residency certificates, everything. And then I asked him, why is it that we have this mindset? He said, when East India Company handed over India to the Crown in 1858 or so, it's about 142 plus 24, 166 years ago. The first batch of ICS went sometime in 1858. And I believe they were given only two objectives. Only two, nothing more. One, keep the natives under control. Don't allow their confidence to come up. Don't raise whatever objection you want for whatever ideas they come out with. Delay implementation as long as possible. And of course, the second was tax. So he said, unfortunately, that was his view, not my view. He seems to feel that we have not, that mindset has not gone away in India. So therefore, my request at this old age is that Prime Minister Modi takes a decision to convert the administrative mindset to management mindset, take more and more managers and give them opportunity to bring speed, imagination, and excellence in decision making and in implementation in the public governance system. I believe India will then accelerate even more because he has a very laudable, very visionary objective, which is to reach $50 trillion by 2047. I think we are all with him. I think we want it to happen. We will do whatever he wants us to do. But without a very efficient, effective, agile, open-minded public governance system, that may be somewhat difficult.
So since you're talking about moving from an administrative mindset to a management mindset as far as governance is concerned, let me ask you, Mr. Murthy, Donald Trump has decided to appoint Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy to head a commission or a committee which will work with the government, not part of the government, but with the government to look at efficiencies across all government functions. Do you believe that that is something that we should experiment with?
I don't know because, of course, Donald Trump is now going to be the president, so it is not proper on my part to comment. Certainly, he knows much more than I do about his country. But I do think that reducing government, reducing latency of action, reducing fat, reducing inefficiency, they are good whether it's America or India or Timbuktu. That's all what I can say.
No, fair point. But let me ask you this, Mr. Murthy. You talked about your friend, the late Mr. Ratan Tata, and we spoke about the kind of leadership attributes that he held very close to his heart.
Yeah.
You believe in many leadership attributes that you hold very dear to you. I know you famously told me once that, in times of a disagreement, let everybody bring data to the table and let data decide and not egos. So, leadership attributes that you believe, Mr. Murthy, that you would like Indian entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs to focus on as we move forward.
Well, first of all, let me say that the entrepreneurs of today are so much smarter than I ever was. I mean, look, the gentleman, Harsha from Swiggy, he says he will deliver food in 10 minutes in this environment where I took an hour and 25 minutes to come from Santa Cruz West to this place. He is a magician. He is a magician. He is a remarkable guy. Therefore, we must all salute him. We must salute him not because he may be able to do or he may not be. That's not the issue. Even to have such an audacious vision, even to have such an audacious aspiration, target, that itself is fantastic. So anyway, having said that, the attributes that I have found have been rather useful at Infosys have been first, courage. As I often say, without courage, no other attribute of a leader will ever find utterance. Courage of conviction, courage to do the right thing, courage to walk the untrodden path, courage to go against the most majority of naysayers. I think these are absolutely necessary for a leader. So therefore, I would say first is courage. The second thing is what I learned from Mahatma Gandhi, that is leadership by example. If you want austerity in your company, you, the leader, show austerity. If you want punctuality in your company by every employee, you come to the office first. Then you don't have to give big speeches. So I think I can go on and on the issue of leadership by example, but I think we in the corporate world must embrace leadership by example. The third thing that I would talk is, this is something that not just the corporate leaders, but leaders in every area in India, in corporate world, in politics, in NGOs, in bureaucracy, everywhere. And that is putting the interest of the community ahead of my personal interest. If I did that, my personal interest will be much larger in the years to come. That's exactly what we at Infosys followed. In the beginning, none of us had any cars. We all traveled by economy until we were $1 billion in revenue, and that was the time that I was there, and we were $288 million of after tax. Until such time, we all traveled economy, even on international flights. So the point I'm saying is, let everybody lead by example. The third thing I would say is, if we seek respect from our stakeholders, then everything will come. Revenues will come. Good employees will join you. Good investors, long-term investors will be there for you. Your profits will improve and your market capitalization will improve. Therefore, don't take the objective as having much bigger market capitalization. Just say, I will earn respect from every stakeholder. And the day you take the decision, everything else will fall in line. And then, you talked about, being fair and using data and facts. A leader has to be fair. Fairness, as you know better than I do, is doing unto others what you want them to do unto you. And that happens if you try and use data and facts to decide every transaction. And you have to start every transaction on a zero base, because then your employees will have full confidence in you. Even if they lose a transaction, they will say, this gentleman or this lady tried their best, and this time I didn't have proper data, therefore I lost. So that's very important. And then, of course, I already spoke about it. This is what I learned from my extraordinary friend, late Rahul Bajaj. And then once in 1993, I was a nobody. Even today I am a nobody, but at that time I was even a smaller nobody. And I asked Rahul Bajaj, I had probably 30 seconds with him, which management book should I read? Rahul was Rahul, the way he would talk. He said, why are you trying to waste money on managed books and all? Realize that competition is your best management guru. I tell you, from 1993, I wrote it down on a page, and I pasted it in my office. Until I retired in 2014, I practiced. Competition is your best management guru. The last thing, I can give an 8-hour lecture on all the whatever I learned, but the last thing that I will say is, when in doubt, disclose. That is the finest corporate governance principle that you people can follow. I will stop here because otherwise I can go on and on and on.
That will be an 8-hour masterclass, and I know that there are many people in this room who would sign up to listen to you, Mr. Murthy, but those are gems. When in doubt, disclose. I have a personal library, a collection of Mr. Murthy's gems. He always also, I remember saying, telling me that let the good news take the stairs and let the bad news take the elevator. And that's another very important lesson that he has taught me over the years. But Mr. Murthy, let's talk a little bit about work-life balance. Your 70-hour comment has gone viral, and you're not going to be able to live it down anytime soon. Any change in thinking on that one, or do you believe that you were just grossly misunderstood?
No. First of all, I don't believe in work-life balance. I don't know if KV is here. KV Kamath, about 25 years ago, he was on a platform at a function like this. And he was asked, KV, what do you think of work-life balance? He said, look, we in India, we're a poor country. We have a lot of challenges. We first have to get a life, then we can worry about work-life balance. So therefore, my view is, at this point of time, when Prime Minister Modi is working so hard, probably he works 100 hours a week, when his cabinet ministers are working very hard, when his bureaucrats are all working very hard, the only way we can show our appreciation for all these wonderful things that are happening is by our working out. Frankly, I was a little bit disappointed in 1986 or something when we moved from 6-day week to 5-day week. I was not very happy with that. I think in this country, we have to work very hard, because there is no substitute for hard work. Even if you're the most intelligent guy, you need to work hard. So therefore, I am sorry, I have not changed my view. I will take this with me to my grave. I am very proud of having worked very hard. I used to go to the office at 6:20 in the morning and return at 8:30 in the evening. That was 14 hours and 10 minutes. And I worked 6.5 days till I retired. And I'm very proud of it. Therefore, I am not going to take it back.
Yes, I know you believe very firmly in that. I know Mrs. Murthy doesn't necessarily agree with you. I know that there has been a lot of conversation around that. But I don't know how many of you know this. He's quite the romantic. He courted Mrs. Murthy when they were both in Pune while she was an engineer at what was then Telco. And Mr. Murthy, I know that you would sing to her as well. I'm going to put you in a little bit of a corner. Do you remember the Elvis Presley song that you sang to Mrs. Murthy?
Well, you know, I have sung a lot of Kannada songs, but very few people here understand Kannada. I used to sing Hindi songs, but my Hindi is so bad, I just would not dare sing it in public. However, I used to sing to her several English songs. You know, I'm a great fan of Elvis Presley, Frank Sinatra, and later on Perry Como, Cliff Richard. I mean, you name them. So maybe since you are like my daughter, you have that freedom and you have asked me.
I'm going to exercise it today.
And I will try, but I'm a goof up, so I hope you people will put up with me. Wise men say only fools rush in, but I can't help falling in love with you. Shall I stay? Would it be a sin if I can't help falling in love with you? Like a river flows surely to the sea, darling, so it seems some things are meant to be. Take my hand, take my whole life too, for I can't sing, for I can't help falling in love with you, for I can't help falling in love with you. Thank you.
Mr. Murthy, alternate career, sir, at 80. Alternate career at 80.
You know, I am 79. Nowadays, obviously, I can't sing well. But when I was young, even my wife was impressed. And
impressed enough to marry you?
At that time, she was not my wife. She was impressed. I sang this song in a rickshaw. And then I proposed to her. And probably she had to accept because that rickshaw driver thought I was crazy or something. So she said, okay.
So finally, Mr. Murthy, thank you for that love lesson as well. So he's given us corporate lessons, singing lessons, love lessons. Finally, Mr. Murthy, your message to India Inc. Your last message to India Inc.
Well, you know, as I said before, we are an extraordinary juncture in the history of this country. Never before in the last 300 to 500 years did India receive any recognition, did India receive any respect. But that day has come. And if we let go of this opportunity, it will come probably after a long time. So therefore, this is the time for every one of us to join hands with our Prime Minister, with our ministers, both at the center and the state, and then show that we fully appreciate them by working smart, by working hard, by practicing good values, and by conducting ourselves as model citizens of this country. And as corporate people, you have a very important job of demonstrating good governance and ensuring that there is no governance deficit. I would say if we created jobs and if we followed good principles of corporate governance, I believe we would have done our job. And I would say that it behooves us to do this at this point of time because we are at a unique juncture. I don't think any other generation of Indians had this opportunity. And therefore, let not this opportunity slip away from our hands. Let us seize it with both hands. Let us work hard. And let's make sure that posterity remembers as a set of people who had the country's interest first. And that's my fervent request to you. Because at the end of the day, remember that the founders of this country had the dream that India will be a nation where the poorest child in the remotest village has decent access to nutrition, healthcare, shelter, and education. And most importantly, has the confidence that its own progenies will have a better quality of life than it has had. And that is our responsibility. And that's our task. I still remember a Polish story. There was a Polish author, and it was in 1900 or so. He decided to migrate to US because he heard that US was a very rich country and the roads of New York were paved with gold, etc. So on the ship, everybody was telling all kinds of stories, and he landed at Ellis Island. When he landed at Ellis Island, he observed three things. One, the streets of New York were not paved with gold. Number two, the streets of New York were not paved at all. And number three, that he was to pave the streets of New York. Therefore, there is nobody else outside India who will take up this responsibility for right reasons. It is your and my responsibility to make sure that the life of our posterity, life of our progeny, the life of future children will be completely fulfilled in terms of the basic needs and in terms of hope and confidence, and that those children will receive respect from the Committee of Nations. That's all what I would say. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, N.R. Narayana Murthy, thank you very much, sir, for joining us here this evening. What an absolute pleasure, privilege, and honor it is to have you join us here at the Global Leadership Summit. Thank you so much.
Well, a huge round of applause again for Mr. Narayana Murthy. Thank you.
And we've got more singing coming up, ladies and gentlemen. We've got Ajay Bijli in the house, and he's going to be performing in exactly 30 minutes from now. So keep those dancing shoes on. We've got Ajay Bijli in a whole new avatar joining us shortly. Thank you very much, sir.